Hi, Brett. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Okay. Well, what I want to start with is you studied American mythology in college. Where do you think documentary making fits within this pantheon of American myth?
Well, I don't distinguish documentary from fiction. I mean, D.A. Pennebaker's movie about Bob Dylan is a great documentary and it's a great piece of myth making, you know? So cinema to me is like the modern day campfire. It's really one of the great, sort of, probably the greatest form for myth. All movies are myths, So, I mean, look, I think that I'm just, when I make a movie, I'm not, I'm just trying to use the tools available to me and to exploit the medium that I'm working within. That's I think my biggest gripe about documentaries is I feel like oftentimes they lack aesthetics and they're not fully taking advantage of cinema. Because you see, I think a lot of people have a reliance on the visual, but movies are over 50% sound,
Right.
or at least 50%, right? So, to me, you can sculpt with sound, you can paint with sound, you can create energy with sound, and you can tell an entire story with just sound, And so, I'm oftentimes dealing with these big subjects like the Rolling Stones or Kurt Cobain, and subjects that have been well written about and well documented. And so, the thing that I'm always asking myself is, how does this story lend itself to film, to cinema? And with Kurt Cobain, we have the ultimate subject because he expressed himself so vividly in both the visual mediums and oral mediums. And in a way, all artists are creating an autobiography of their lives through their work. Our experiences are embedded in our art. So with Kurt, you have one of the most complete visual and oral autobiographies of anyone I know from my generation.
And then he was someone who recorded a lot of himself as well. He videoed, he recorded audio tapes. So how did that help in sculpting this story?
Well, when I listen to interviews with Kurt, interviews with Kurt tend to raise more questions than answers. He could be, I never found him to be that comfortable in the interview process. Sometimes deceptive, sometimes hostile, sometimes indifferent, and sometimes overly earnest. So rather than have him tell a story through interviews, I wanted him to tell a story through his art. And because his art and all the audio I discovered is like unfiltered media. It's raw and it's immediate and it's full of truths.
Am I right in saying that initially you didn't want to have any interviews at all?
You're right, yes, because initially I thought it would just be Kurt, all Kurt. Kurt, Kurt in interviews, Kurt's art, etc., etc. But then when I heard the interviews, I was like, he's better expressing himself in other ways. So then I decided to go interview his family to help fill in the cracks. And it was imperative that we got all of them. If for example, Don Cobain wouldn't participate, I don't know what I would have done. I probably would have not done interviews. Okay. But we have the holy primal 5 people in Kurt's life: his mother, father, sister, first love, best friend, and his wife. And the 5 of them can tell his story better than anyone else.
And I believe this is the first time they've opened up about Kurt?
It's the first time that his mother, father, and sister have been interviewed on camera, yeah.
And what do you think helped them push them over the edge to help you with this project?
Well, hopefully they weren't pushed over an edge, but I'm assuming that's translation. It was the connective tissue is Frances, Kurt's daughter. When she came on board, the rest of the family members wanted to participate.
And I believe initially you were approached by Courtney Love.
Yeah.
So And there were some disputes about who owned the rights and whether the story or the material would be released.
It wasn't like a dispute. It was
Okay.
just like information was being handed to me like little by little. You know, it wasn't like at the beginning someone said, "Here are all the places you have to go to collect these things." Because I figured when Courtney came to me, she had the rights to do the film. So thus began an odyssey that I think took longer than Homer's.
Did she tell you why she picked you?
Yeah, she loved my movie, The Kid Stays in the Picture. And I do documentaries very different than most people. You know, my movies are meant to be experienced. You know, I absolutely discourage your audience from seeing this movie at home on television. They should see this movie in a cinema. It was intended to be seen in a cinema. So, I don't know how I got on that tangent, but that's what I'll say is, sorry, man. I know this is that you're like in the home video business, but if I had my way, nobody would ever see this movie at home on a television. I mean, if you can't see it in a cinema, then watch it at home for sure, loud with a remote control in your hand. Can I give instructions for your viewers in case they can't see it in the cinema, how they're supposed to watch it at home?
But is this with, does this go back to what you mentioned earlier, the way a movie is 50% sound and
Yeah,
how
because my sound can't be heard through your television speakers. You're only getting a little bit of it. I designed this to be an immersive experience. You know, when you're mixing for television, you do it in a couple days. You know, when you're mixing for cinema, you know, we took months.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And well,
Wait,
getting
but can
back
I
to
explain how they're supposed to watch it at home?
yeah,
Yeah.
be my
Okay,
guest.
so this is my advice for watching Montage of Heck at home. Okay, so first I'd like you to, if possible, connect your speakers to your television set. Okay, if that is not possible, then watch the movie with a remote control in your hand. Every time there's a scene with music, go full on, just crank it. And then, you know, bring it back down for the dialogue.
Okay. And when you, because obviously you've seen every frame a lot of times during the editing process, was there a time of separation then and afterwards where you watched the movie as such?
Oh, have I watched it with remote? Oh, every day before we finished the mix, when I was in my no before. Oh, well, but you got to understand when I was making the movie, and I would sit in my office watching it on my screen twice a day, every day. I always have the remote control in my hand, and I'd always crank it during the music scenes and bring it back down for the dialogue scenes because, unfortunately, I'm not legally allowed to do that mix on television. You have to compress the highs and the lows. So I'm not able to. I got as close as I could, but you, the viewer, you can go up and down as much as you want.
Okay, so watch the thing with remote in your hand.
Well, watch in the cinema, and if you can't get to the cinema, then watch it with a remote in your hand or with headphones on.
Okay, well, let's go back to
But
how
this
the
is
project
important,
started.
man. I don't
No,
know.
but,
This is good
it's-
stuff. This is like the best stuff right here. But go ahead.
When Courtney Love approached you, how familiar were you with the story of Kurt Cobain?
I mean, it's just I lived through it. You know, I'm the same age and part of the same culture, so I experienced it as it was unfolding. But the word fan in English is rooted in fanatic. And the only thing I'm really fanatical about are my family and cinema. So I was a casual fan of Nirvana, you know. It was like, but again, I didn't approach them; they approached me.
And in hindsight now then, what do you think was your own biggest misconception about who he was?
In worst case scenario, he came off as someone who didn't appreciate his success, which, you know, oftentimes you hear celebrities gripe about, you know, how they don't want to be famous or this and that. And for someone like you and I, we're like, oh, shut the fuck up, man. But with Kurt, you know, that I think really, now that I know everything I've seen, that he was just an artist, you know? And at a certain point, I think it must have started to feel like a job doing this sort of stuff when you're selling 600,000 albums a week is totally unnecessary. But
Right.
they kept throwing him out to do it. And I think I'm with him, man. You know, people ask me to like, why do you think Kurt is such a, you know, lasting force? I'm like, why are you asking? Answer the fucking question yourself. You know, like, what does that have to do with me making the fucking movie? You know what I mean? So like, I'm with Kurt. You know, people are like asking him to, you know, explain the meaning of a song. What fucking difference does it make what I interpret it as? It's what you interpret it as.